Hello and welcome to Look for the Light, a podcast where we dive into the world of The Last of Us. I'm your host, Stuart Trainer, and I'm joined, as always, by someone who has definitely burnt down a steakhouse or two in her past. It's Jess Sterling. Jess, how are you doing?
If David was in that steakhouse, you can guarantee I'd not only light it on fire, I'd be like chucking Molotov cocktails over there for sure.
A little bit deserved, I think. Maybe
A
more
little
than a little
bit.
bit, actually. Yeah, more than a little bit.
Yeah, this is, we say this every time. This was such a rough episode. Watching this one, I was like, oh, it's so depressing. Oh, it's awful.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of probably some bleak. Like everything up until now has been dark and it's been very kind of emotionally kind of manipulative. This is much more of like we're dealing with some nasty themes. And of course, if you're listening, we hope you watched the episode and thus understand what we're referring to. But if for some rare reason that you are jumping into this not having watched the episode, maybe go watch it and maybe look up the kind of like the themes
Yeah, the
to kind
content
of look out
warnings that
for.
are out
Yeah,
there.
because
Yeah. There's a lot of
this
them.
is
We're touching the third rail this episode. There's like
we
we're
really are.
getting into everything that is bad about society, and watching someone like David thrive after a massive outbreak is horrifying. Well,
Yeah.
thrive maybe isn't the best word, but
Yeah.
come alive.
Well, if you're new here and you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. Massively helps us out. We arrive in your podcatcher each and every week. So look us up, look for the Light Podcast. You can also follow us on all social medias at Look for the Light Pod. And you can also watch our lovely faces alongside beautiful quotes from the TV show on our YouTube channel, which is at Look for the Light Pod. And of course, if you ever wanted to get in touch with us, you can leave feedback. 5-star reviews massively do help us out, but you can also email us at lookforlightpodcast@gmail.com. Other small piece of admin, of course, we will be covering everything that is up to and including season 1, episode 8. We're going to try not to get into spoilers beyond or video game spoilers. We'll leave that for a section at the very end and we'll flag that up for you so you don't need to worry. But with that all in mind, Jess, are you ready to dive into season 1, episode 8?
Oh yeah, we better.
Yeah, let's get started.
I sense doubt in there.
I haven't lost faith in you, David. I'm just scared.
Not from them.
I still believe. It's been, the last 6 months have been hard.
For all of us. But I need to know you're with me.
Yeah. Good.
Now go get our guns. We're going hunting.
We open up with a look at a group of people that we haven't met before. We get to see people struggling in the cold of, I imagine we're still in Colorado at this point. It's not too far away from university. And yeah, things could be going a lot better for this group. They seem to be hungry, they seem to be starving, and they are grieving.
Yeah, this is also kind of our first glance at organized religion in this world. It's interesting that we're 8 episodes deep and, many, many hours deep into the game. And there really hasn't been a ton of talk of religion. I think it's an important thing to include, especially when you're building out the world of The Last of Us, that you have to imagine religion is going to come into play in terms of how people cope with stress, with the upheaval of the outbreak. Some people will turn to religion as a way to get by, and some people will eventually stray away from it because of all these awful things happening. So it's interesting. We're thrust right into Silver Lake and the people that live there, and David, and how he kind of runs this very almost like antiquated patriarchal society, rooted in religion. and using that as a way to say, you know what, when we are in need, he shall provide. We will get through it by the grace of God. And it is this. It's awful because there's so many times I didn't realize, Stuart, when it's like there are little kids utilized in ways to really tug at your heartstrings here. We have like the little
Mhm.
girl asking about her father, like she wants to bury his body. David says the ground is too cold to dig, which should be, if you haven't played the game, should be our first warning sign of like, where's the money actually going, though? Like, what are
Mhm.
you gonna do with the
Yeah.
body? Yeah. So coming in hot immediately with like David is the leader of this group. And it's really interesting coming away from everything going on in Jackson 2 episodes ago to see a community thriving, and this community very obviously not.
Yeah, we get. I think some of. I think the best foreshadowing in a single episode. The banner, which is an inclusion that they have from the game, although the game doesn't really have as many religious overtones. I think it's more that like it's there as more of a kind of reminder and a little kind of just set decoration, really. Whereas obviously in the show they've really kind of fleshed that out and made it into a very religious community that follow David. But the when we are in need, he shall provide. You gotta just tip your hat to that because it's just such a good, subtle message of just, yeah, okay, of course, if you're reading it in the religious sense, he, God, the Almighty, whoever, they will be the one to provide. But no, it's the more personal meaning. He, people, they will provide because they are turning to cannibalism, which
Mhm.
is something that we get into, like, kind of is fully kind of revealed and we dive into later on. But knowing that where this episode goes and seeing those little breadcrumbs, like just peppered in alongside, like you say, not being able to bury in the ground, is just it's some good writing, and I've got to appreciate that for just like leaving those little breadcrumbs for people that are looking for them. We also get James introduced, which is played by Troy Baker, who is the video game's voice for Joel. This is another instance of one of the voice actors getting a part in the show. And of all places I expected Troy Baker to turn up, I did not expect it to be here. Wild choice, I thought.
No, because it's the exact, like, not the antithesis of Joel, but, like, certainly a very different character than Joel, and a pretty large character in the grand scheme of, like, this episode, right? I know Troy Baker has said a lot of times, "Oh, I thought I'd just be, like, a clicker, like, I thought I'd have, like, a small cameo." James has a large role in this episode, and really important in terms of setting up who David is and
Hmm.
the power that he holds in this group. Um, and the tension between James and David immediately, where David is talking about, oh, we're running low on food. Okay, there's been some people who've spotted a deer. We'll go out and try to hunt. And David straight up accuses James of losing faith in him, which
Hmm.
David can't have, right? Like, we set up the episode where we're supposed to be bought in a little bit in terms of, oh, David, he's a leader, we're supposed to trust him. For, again, people who haven't played the game, they don't know. And so David saying, oh, James, it seems like you're losing a little bit of faith in me. Really what it is David is a narcissist and he craves power and control, and he sees James slipping away from him, and he can't
Hmm.
have that. So he's gonna, okay, we're gonna go on this little hunting trip, just you and I, do a little bonding. James is a really fascinating character, Stuart. I want to know your thoughts on how you read James in terms of why he's putting up with David. Like, what, it's obvious he's not necessarily the most like religious guy, I wouldn't say. So like, what is James's deal? Why does he stick around?
Yeah, I see it as that he is the number two, and so that he's privy to more information than the others, and that in itself is like, well, he has a choice. He can either expose the horrors that he is privy to and what David's true nature is and what they are up to, or he can keep quiet and keep stability and hold on to whatever fragile system they have working, that to have that maintained. It's funny that when David like questions everyone's kind of faith, um, instinctually James doesn't, like, he kind of makes excuses for them. He says that they haven't lost faith in you, David. They're just scared. And it takes David to really kind of say, no, 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 I'm asking about you. You seem to be the one that kind of like lost faith. And he just goes, I still believe. The last 6 months have been hard. And I think it's a testament to, like, maybe it's only recently that the horrors of everything have been divulged to James. Maybe James wasn't aware of all of this until fairly recently, so it's something that is still percolating and brewing. But I get the impression that because this winter has been so harsh, by necessity he's had to be brought into the fold a little bit. And for the sake of just getting through the winter, maybe that's what's keeping him quiet. I don't know. Maybe it is also just a sunken cost fallacy of just, well, where else can I turn? If I leave here, I'm alone in the wilderness in the winter as well, and a very harsh winter at that. I won't survive. So maybe it is just that.
Yeah, I do think there's obviously we're forced to read into a lot of James's motives because we're not exactly privy to his private thoughts or anything.
Hmm.
But if I'm giving him any sort of benefit of the doubt, I could also see it as, well, if I leave, who's going to protect these other people, right? Like, what will
Yeah.
David get up to if I'm not
Yeah.
around? I do think that's a strong possibility. It's possible that like the dam is about to break at some point, with James, and we just don't see it because then he ends up dying. But yeah, I find their relationship really interesting. Especially, I think Troy Baker does like a really good job of emoting that James is conflicted. James is very obviously conflicted, but really, like you said, sunk cost fallacy. Like, there's not much he can do. If he leaves, he probably won't survive on his own. They're barely surviving as a community. And I do think there is something to keeping this secret. Who knows how long it's been that they've had to start resorting to cannibalism, but
Hmm.
the fact that he's having to keep this secret, pun intended, probably eats away at him. Like, he has to it's I love the show Yellow Jackets, and this isn't a spoiler for Yellow Jackets because literally in the very first scene of the entire series, you find out that these teen girls have resorted to cannibalism, and I find it so fascinating that at the same time that I'm watching Yellow Jackets and so rooting for all of those characters, despite the fact that they are engaging in cannibalism in the exact same way that these like Silver Lake occupants are, right? Like, they're forced to resort to it. It's not like they wanted to do it, they kind of have to do it to survive. And yet I see, obviously there are reasons David is like a despicable human being beyond the cannibalism of it all, but I
Hmm.
just find it so interesting how differently I view the characters, and there is something so much more malicious and manipulative and just awful about people consuming other human beings without knowing that's what they're doing. Like,
Yes.
there is something so much worse about that.
Yeah, that's particularly kind of horrible scenes where you see them doing that later, and it's tough to watch because, yeah, it's taking away agency, which is the theme of this entire episode, of like
Mhm.
someone getting off on that kind of like power trip. But equally, it's like it's just a lack of information. It's a lack of kind of understanding, and choice, and it's brutal. Yeah, this group is just not. This isn't how you do it. Like, I want to see more Jacksons in the world. I don't want to see more Silver Lakes. But unfortunately,
Mm.
this is the reality of how tough it is, and we will come to understand why they are in the situation that they are and why they're still here and things.
You're quite a hunter. We didn't even hear you coming.
Turn around and walk away.
Okay.
Just go.
Okay, all I ask is 10 seconds of your time. I just want
I
to talk.
won't say it twice.
Please, just 10 seconds. My name is David. This is my friend James. We're from a larger group, women, children, and we're all very, very hungry.
Ellie is out of food. She has measly rations that she's nibbling away at, and she's still, even though she only has a small amount, she still saves some for Joel. But Joel is struggling, seemingly finding an infection from the wound that he has. Thankfully, the stitching seems to have worked, seems to have stemmed the bleeding. But of course, dull needles and threads from 20 years old probably aren't the cleanest, and so Joel has a pretty hefty infection and is not doing too well at the moment.
Yeah, Ellie is forced to survive on her own. And we know once upon a time she asked Joel to teach her to hunt. He taught her to shoot, so she knows the basics. But that's really different than expecting like a 14-year-old girl to go out on her own in the really cold weather and hunt down an animal to kill and bring back. Like, let's not even
Hmm.
forget the fact Ellie can barely hold this rifle up. Like, how is she going to drag a deer back to where they're staying? It's seemingly an impossible task. And I like that I don't want to see Ellie struggle, but I like that it's not that she's immediately an amazing shot, right? She like
Hmm.
trips while trying to shoot this rabbit, which I would much rather have than the scene that we get in the game with the rabbit, which is so traumatizing. Uh, I'll never
there's a
ever
really
forget it.
there's an incredible clip of someone that when they were streaming it, and like 'cause it goes from very kind of like harsh, brutal scenes before, and then it cuts forward like with Joel being injured, and it fades away, and it opens on this lovely scene of a little bunny like hopping along, and the streamer she goes, "Oh, a bunny!" and then all of a sudden, whew, an arrow comes in, takes the bunny out, and she just breaks down. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's
It's
tough.
so mean. It's
But
really
it's
mean.
so real. I kind of prefer this
Reality,
version
yeah.
in the TV show because I like the fact that Ellie's struggling to hunt. I think in the video game there's a lack of appreciation for that kind of sentiment. Is that because she's an adept with the bow, like you're in control as a player because you're playing as Ellie for the first
Mhm.
time here, and so you have a sense of control. So depending on how good or bad you are at the game, I probably would say that will weigh your interpretation of kind of like, well, am I a kid that's kind of like stuck out here trying to hunt and doing badly, or am I like doing okay? I don't know. But the TV show really kind of pushes the point of like, no, she's not proficient with this. She's like you say, she's lugging around a really heavy rifle. She's falling on her ass, and when she does make a shot, it's not a clean one, and she has to then track, which is
Mhm.
it's a mercy that they have the snow and that the blood is so
Blood,
easy
yeah.
to track because otherwise it would be near impossible, surely.
And I love that because it cuts both ways. Yes, it's easy to track game and animals in the snow, but it's also easy to be tracked in the
Hmm.
snow, which of
Yes.
course is gonna come into play later. But she does end up tracking the deer. Unfortunately for her, David and James also happen upon the deer, and Ellie gets the jump on them. She's holding them at gunpoint. I love getting to see this side of Ellie where it's so obvious that she is playing as Joel. Like
Hmm.
she call I love the ditto for buddy boy, right? Like
Yeah.
her voice is deeper. She's calling him buddy boy, and I noticed later in a different scene Joel calls one of them, "Oh, your buddy over there." Like
Yeah.
it's not a coincidence that there's very similar dialogue and mannerisms happening here. And Ellie, of course, is super untrusting of strangers, as she should be. But she can't help but show her cards a little bit when they ask, "Oh, do you need anything?" And very immediately, medicine. Do you have any
Yeah.
antibiotics?
The vocal register goes back up a little bit, back to kind of like the more normal one. And yeah, it's so difficult because I mean she fails the deception check massively. And it's tough because obviously David reads straight through it and decides to play a long game in that like, okay, I'm gonna charm and disarm and use that time to kind of like get what I want out of this situation. So he sends James off to go get them. I did like the whole thing of like, it's not a coded message. Like, I want you to do this, because
Mhm.
again, it's kind of like pulling down barriers of trust and just being like, no, I'm being truthful here, even to my guy, and I'm going to speak plainly to him. And so it just is the beginning of this process of a just slow disarming of Ellie. And oh, it's horrible because in no way do I want to really praise David, but you have to respect the ability to how he does apply some charm. Obviously, we as viewers
Yeah.
see immediately through it because we understand that, like, the storytelling aspect here. I mean, there's threat, but ultimately, he really does so well at playing at Ellie's vulnerabilities that he sees. Doesn't acknowledge them directly and doesn't kind of like highlight to her of like, well, I've got one up on you, little one, and all of this. He's like, no, you're the one in power. He gives her what she wants, but he still maintains a grasp over like what his control is, which is that he's actually he's seeing the full board, whereas Ellie obviously is only seeing this small scenario. And it's so well done in how they kind of convey this. And I've got to give props to like just all the actors involved in it, because it's just done very casually. Like, it's not very kind of like wink to the camera of just look how good we are. It's like, no, no, no. It's just a really good subtle performance.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because on a rewatch, or if when you know what's coming, it's so obviously grooming. Like, it is so
Hmm.
obvious that David has done this before, that he
Yes.
knows what to say to make Ellie feel more comfortable, more ingratiated. He doesn't talk down to her. He compliments her, and he makes it seem like, "Oh, I come from a big group. They rely on me." He very much is, and again, we are going to find out very soon that he knows that she's with Joel. He knows exactly who she's with. So I do feel like there is a sense of him trying to pretend like he's a Joel to other people to kind of
Hmm.
gain her trust a little bit. And yeah, it's so gross. When you know what he's doing, he tries to call himself like, oh, a decent person. He's trying to take care of his people. I love Ellie saying like, "What is this, a cult? Like, what's going on over
Hmm.
here?" And then getting into the conversation about religion, and how he says, "Oh, well, it's funny enough that I was a math teacher prior to the outbreak, but now I believe in God. It took the whole world ending." But we know, no, David is using this as a means to manipulate people, to
Hmm.
surround himself, to be a shepherd, to get people to follow him. He's using religion. And I have to imagine, like, again, the more we know about David, it's like, of course he was a math teacher. Of course he worked in some field that involved being around little kids. And
Hmm.
he saw the outbreak as his opportunity to gain the power he'd always wanted, to exert his control over people in ways he always wanted to do, but maybe wasn't able to do. And he took his opportunity here. And so going back and watching these scenes, knowing all of that, it really changes your perspective on who David is. Um, and I love Ellie just saying the whole world ended and you still believe that shit. Like, I think it makes so much sense for the world that Ellie wouldn't really be a believer in religion. Why would she be?
Yeah.
She certainly didn't grow up with any of it. And for how bleak the entire world is, like I said, you're gonna have people who will then find ways to continue through religion because it helps them get by. And you'll also find people who really reject the idea of religion because it's like, what God would put us through this, you know?
Hmm. It's also a very kind of, I think, a Fedra type mindset of just like religion seems like an additional extra that can't be afforded. Like, it's frivolity, it's
Well,
kind of like indulgent almost in the way of just like, well, no, you're here to do a job and do a role. That's part of like fascism, is like taking away collective community and
exactly.
identity and stuff. Being like,
It's
no, you serve the state, you serve this. Yeah.
It's taking away the ability to form community around other belief
Hmm.
systems. So that's exactly, and Fedra would never be like, wanting people to organize in some way, to find
Hmm.
community in some way.
Very much so.
And it's so interesting that his group, David's group, evolved out of the Pittsburgh QZ falling. And like
Hmm.
him, and I don't know if he said it was James, I think it was, started kind of collecting people as they went from place to place. But it started out of a QZ, a Fedra QZ falling. And that's where this group originates from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a small little just touches where he mentions also like fireflies and Fedra. And so it shows the extent of like the Fireflies' reach in terms of an organization. It's not just a Boston thing that happened to have moved. They do have different outposts, and it's not as
Mhm.
if because with the way in which we saw Kansas, it very much kind of may skew the idea of like the Fireflies' extent because you might just think, oh, okay, well, it's very isolated because Kansas didn't have a Fireflies uprising. They had their own kind of one. But it's nice to see that the Fireflies do have this little network that is beyond just the Boston QZ and obviously Colorado and where they've ended up
Mm.
going afterwards. I love what you said about the way in which David is using religion because I think a very kind of common critique of this episode in particular from reviewers was that it's highly kind of critical of religion, and I don't necessarily think it is. I think it's highly critical of people using religion, like you've just said, and using tools that they have at their disposal, like systematic tools to conduct abuses of power and of people. And this is exactly what David's doing. The use of Christianity is purely for the fact that it makes most sense for the demographic and the location of where they are.
And because it happens in real life.
And it happens, yes.
Yeah, it happens without there being an outbreak that people will use any sort of belief system to gain the trust and congregate people together for a common belief and be corrupt about it, right? Like that's a thing that happens in our everyday life. Why wouldn't it happen even more, even worse in a situation in which society has crumbled and people need something to latch onto? People need to find a way to be able to build community. It's not as easy after an outbreak like this. You can't just get on the internet and make friends. Like you can't do that. You have to find ways to connect to people, and religion is certainly a way to do that. Um and so we're kind of given this picture of who David could possibly be. Maybe he is this altruistic sort of figure, but the conversation turns, and I love the way they do this, where he
Mhm.
mentions, "Oh, there was this guy, our guy, we had a guy named Alec, and he was killed by a guy who had a little girl running around with him." And Ellie is, I think not that she lets her guard down, but I do think she's sucked into the story of David
Yeah.
in a way that is a little bit of a distraction to then James coming up behind her.
Yeah, I mean, he's leveraging his experience as a preacher for this group, in that preachers are storytellers. I mean, they're compelling people that have to hold an audience's attention, and so he employs exactly that. He also kind of starts referring to Joel in the negative, refers to him as a crazy man, which is kind of just another small element of like sowing doubt into Ellie as to whether or not she can trust Joel, and maybe
Mhm.
why there's a reason to trust him more in a situation. And yeah, James gets the jump on Ellie. And then David just calms it down, tells him to lower the gun, give her the medicine, and let her go
Mhm.
because he's playing the long game, which is so, so manipulative and Machiavellian and just evil evil person kind of like plans. And at this point, I think if you're watching for the first time and you get to this and you're like, what the heck is up here? I think this is like the real switch moment where you're like, yeah, okay, there's something certainly really up here.
Mhm. And he seems even more narcissistic to me on a rewatch when he knows that he can get James to do what he wants him to do. Like,
Mhm.
your community lost a member, and you're telling me that it's possible that this teen girl was involved, and you're just gonna let her go because one guy says so? Because we'll see it so many times in this episode where David gives orders that it would be directly against what you'd think people would want him to do. Let Ellie survive, right? And it's because he wants her to be his pet. And so he
Mhm.
needs her to be alive in order to do that. But Ellie, takes that second and runs off with the medicine. She's not hanging around there. Unfortunately, there isn't much to do. There isn't much she can do to cover her tracks. She's in the snow.
No.
What is she going to do? Any cleaning up she's going to do of her tracks there's still going to be something there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a hunter. I don't know how to cover my tracks, but I'd imagine it would be extremely difficult, let alone she's trying to get back to Joel to administer this medication. Like, there's a lot going on. She still hasn't found any food because she gave away the deer. So there's really not much she can do. And I really feel for her when she's trying to administer the penicillin. She's not a doctor. She's not even an adult. Like, how would she know? Maybe they had some sort of training in the Fedra school she was in for medications, but even still, she really doesn't know what she's doing, and she has no idea if what she's gonna do is even gonna work. Also, she has no idea if Joel has, like, an allergy to any sort of medication, like
Yeah.
penicillin,
I
so
think this is at the point where you're like, well, it can't get any worse because he's probably going to die. So, I mean, let's just try
yes.
something. I watched I think it was like a one of these kind of like Wired type videos where someone kind of fact checks things from like fictional
Oh,
like
yeah.
TV shows, and they talked about this scene in particular. And it's like, well, if you didn't know, just doing it is better than nothing. Like, maybe it's not in the most ideal area. Maybe it could have been better, like intravenously or something like that. Maybe, but I mean, just
It's
administering what
antibiotics,
seem to
yeah.
be antibiotics is the best course of action when you don't know. Yeah, it's so it just lends itself to this whole thing of like, yeah, she's fully on her own. And not only that, she's hungry, she's cold, and there are like creepy guys out there. Like it's so difficult to consider like Ellie's mindset in this moment of just how vulnerable she is. And it's got to be so disconcerting for her while she's also then got to administer medicine without knowing. It's pretty rough. Um,
Yeah.
but the scene when she does, and then she just lays down next to Joel, I think is probably the most subtle way of just showing how close these two have come and how different their journey is. When we first met these two, Joel pulled a gun on her and she was trying to stab him with a switchblade. Now she is lying down next to him, tentatively kind of placing a hand over his chest, and Joel, barely conscious, uses the small fraction of energy that he has to just gently, slightly just lean his head towards her as if like kind of leaning in for a hug. This fucking scene. Small little gestures like this absolutely break me because it's
But it's
like,
all they have,
oh,
though, right? Like, it's literally all they have. It's all they can do. And
mhm,
the bond has never been more clear than it is here, where
yeah,
it's not like you said, they go from being fairly antagonistic to like, okay, we're making small jabs at each other, to all of that is gone, and we are physically clinging on to each other because there's nothing else we can do in this moment but hope, right? Hope and
mhm,
antibiotics. That's all we have.
yep,
So yeah, I love seeing Ellie take control, especially because like in the game, you are playing as Ellie during these portions. And so getting to see her take the reins and see what she's learned from Joel in their months of traveling together. Yeah, it's great. It's perfect.
If you've heard a rumor, yes, we found a girl who was with the man who took Alec from us. When the sun rises, I'll lead a group out to pick up her trail. Won't be hard to find in the snow. We'll follow it to wherever they're hiding, and we'll bring that man to justice.
You should kill him. You should kill both of them.
Then it's dinner time.
Venison.
Yeah. In probably the most unappetizing plastic tub in the world as well. Um, this is the practicality of this whole situation. Of course, it's a big group. They're going to be kind of collectively or eating communally and like kind of putting something together in like a big pot of something. And the way they talk about it, the way they look to each other, they all have their suspicions, right? There's no way
I
they
think at the
don't.
very least, the people in the kitchen do. I don't know
Mhm.
about the actual, like, community members, but obviously they're trying to keep this hush hush. Like, I imagine only
Yes.
David, James, and then Beardy, like, kind of are aware, or at least that small subgroup is aware. And I do think the kitchen staff are probably like, they're definitely questioning it, but I think to get by in their heads, they're like, they must have found a deer. It is venison. Um,
Mhm.
and so yeah, the preparation is like so gross to think about and watch on retrospect. And James and David coming in like victoriously with this deer they got from Ellie, right? Like they're, oh, we got a big deer, but it is silent in that room.
Yes.
Like, no, you could hear a pin drop. No one is celebrating them in this moment.
Yeah, because word has got out about what has happened. James obviously getting a bit loose-lipped when he has arrived back without David, having to explain the situation. Of course, gossip in the small community has travelled, and everyone is probably angry, rightfully. It seems to be a sense of that they want justice for the loss of, I believe it's Hannah, her father, who was killed by
Mhm.
Joel. And David tries to explain the situation to them. We get an explanation that is afforded to the group now, not just one that's given to James, which is, of course, we'll kind of go after them tomorrow morning. We'll follow them and find out where they're hiding, and then we'll bring the man to justice. So there's a bit of a resolution to that, but it feels so hollow because I think you've seen the skepticism from James as well in that whole thing of like, well, why of all this? Like, why don't we just kind of take her and get justice that way? Why are we playing this kind of game? And Hannah, who is grieving her father, has the audacity to speak up and suggest that they kill him, they kill both of them. And David doesn't take kind to that, gives her a backhand,
No.
and proceeds to be the worst manipulative grooming piece of shit there is right now. Because I think this is when, if the penny hasn't dropped, like, tip out the whole piggy bank at this point.
Now
Like,
you
this is
know.
when you come to realize exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, he says Hannah will always have a father and you will show him respect when he's speaking. He also, there's a very subtle like physical motion when Hannah's mother stands up and he like, you can tell how much control he has over this group
Hmm.
when he just makes a very nonverbal gesture and she sits right back down.
Yep.
Um yeah, this is fuck the patriarchy. Like this is my nightmare. Just like this one man in charge
Hmm.
calling himself everyone's father. Like fuck all the way off, David.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, he basically all out says like yeah, you can have your opinions on what we should do with these two, but I'm the one who's going to be making that decision and you have no right to speak back on it. Yeah, in case anyone, the illusion is gone. We all know
Yes.
now what a horrible person David is,
Yeah.
and it's only going to get worse.
It's just the way in which he words it as well. Like, I know now you don't think you have a father, but the truth is you'll always have a father and you will show him respect when he's speaking. It's like, dude, come on, just
Mhm.
fuck all the way off.
He's a
Get out of
narcissist,
here.
yeah.
And he then proceeds to say grace, and they all tuck in. And I think that this scene is horrible because, of course, you get the hesitation from those that have prepared it a little bit. You get others blindly, just hungrily, like scoffing it down because they are that hungry. And I think the most telling thing about this entire thing, and I think there's a couple of things that I liked about this, is that David takes his merry old time, which gives me the impression that he's not that hungry, which means that he is probably getting preferential treatment.
Well, and he has a bigger portion than everyone else as well.
Has a huge portion indeed, and he's also got the only piece of jewelry that I can see around as well. He's wearing a ring, and it just speaks to this whole thing of like, I am like, clearly there's a hierarchy situation going on here, and he's not ruling as an equal, and he's not like kind of leading people because he's just kind of like a leader amongst the group. No, he is an authoritative leader who is like abusing his power. And yeah, feeding someone's dad back to them in a stew is just so horrid.
Yeah. It's really messed up because, like I said, the difference in the ways the shows use cannibalism with Yellow Jackets, it's much more of, we're doing this to survive. Obviously, there are other things involved that I won't get into, but to not know and to have it be this someone's wife, someone's father, someone's like community member, their friend, it's so much more despicable.
Mhm.
And you just see on his face like he loves the power and control that he has, and it's just devastating because you imagine the people in his congregation have nowhere else to turn. uh so what can they do? They can't exactly stand up to this guy. He's the one giving them food, making sure they're not starving to death, you know.
Mhm. And it's funny in the portion size that James takes, it's a very small mouthful. Takes it, is obedient, but then still tries to stomach it, like puts a hand to his mouth and is like clearly struggling. And I think that's indicative of like how he's treating with David at the moment, is that he is going along with it, but he's struggling. Like he's got his
Yeah.
doubts, he's got his like hesitations with the whole thing.
Yeah, James, I get a little gaggy when I think about having to interact with David too. It's okay.
Not about, consuming human flesh, just
No, just David. David makes me gaggy. Yeah.
Joel, wake up. Joel, wake the fuck up, Joel. Okay, look at me. There are men coming, okay? I'm gonna lead them away from you. But if anybody makes it down here, you fucking kill them. You got it? Joel, do not fall asleep.
And so we cut to the next morning, and David assembles James and a group of others, and they go in search of Ellie, just as promised. Ellie is going about kind of chores, getting buckets of snow for, I believe, it's Callus, isn't it? The horse's name in
Callus,
this
yeah.
one? Yeah. And tending to that, and sees, and this is another great bit of environmental storytelling, is that like sees not the group at first, but sees the birds flock into the sky because they've been disturbed, which again is another testament to Eddie's good training by Joel of just being aware of your surroundings and your environment, and that people are the biggest threat here, so look out for like those little markers. And Ellie goes in search and sees them approaching.
Yeah. She's so the thing is she had to have known that like they could track her and they might track her, but there's been so much other stuff she's had to deal with, but immediately snaps into action. She tries to wake Joel up. She gives him a knife. If anyone makes it down here, you kill them, okay? Like, I'm going to try to get them away from you. She like blocks off the entrance to where Joel is in the basement, which is incredibly smart. And she's so bold in what she's doing here. She gets on Callus and, hey, motherfuckers, right? She's like getting their attention. I'm sorry, I can't help but say motherfuckers in the way Roman Roy says motherfuckers. Like it comes off. But David gives very strict orders keep her alive. We are bringing her back with us. And I love James with the tiniest hesitation, the tiniest little, do we really want another mouth to feed? Do you think James has any idea of David being a pedophile? Do you think James has any? I feel like at this point maybe he has to like have some sort of a read on something.
I think there certainly is a read of it. I would imagine that nothing like that has happened purely for the fact that there are like people like in care of like Hannah had parents around, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of allusions to anything kind of going on there. I think perhaps he sees the way in which David is approaching his like power, the fact that he is showing a fascination with this young girl that he has met, and the way in which also maybe he's been like treating Hannah since her father has died. And I think perhaps that's setting off alarm bells and saying, okay, well, if he's abusing powers in like all these different areas and he's showing an interest in these areas, maybe that's like why the alarm bells are going off as much as they are. But still, it's not enough to stop anything, which is
No, because
difficult.
James shoots, right? Ellie's trying to get away on Callus. James shoots Callus. Unfortunately, this is where we lose our first horse of the series. And Ellie gets kind of like knocked out during the fall off of Callus.
Mhm.
And everyone, the whole group is surrounding Ellie, like has their guns ready. And David sends off a warning sign, a warning shot of nobody kill her. Right. And
Mhm.
I think if David's not there, they definitely kill her, or at least,
Oh,
very
yeah.
least, like take her prisoner. But I feel like it's no questions asked. Boom, she's dead. David stops them and there sends two guys off. You go take care of Joel, get Joel, whatever, take him hostage, while we deal with Ellie here. And God, Joel at 10% is better than almost anybody at like 100%, right? Like he looked close to death less than 24 hours ago, but now he has a knife and he knows I got to get up off of this mattress and hide so that I can get get the one up on whoever's coming to get me. I called him Mr. Beard. I don't know what this guy's name is.
Mr. Beard is what it is now.
It doesn't
I
matter.
love
Yeah.
I love the fact that the physicality in the attack as well is that Joel kind of almost like falls on the guy. They go to the ground and Joel doesn't like kind of mount him or anything, just kind of proceeds to like get the stab on and like hold him down, but doesn't have the strength to get up in a position of power and stuff. Is just kind of there still kind of barely clinging onto consciousness. I think it's more adrenaline that's fueling him than anything else in this kind of moment. And yeah, it's a again, the delicate brutality of like kind of the when you go into the small elements of it, like it's you look at a scenario like this with The Last of Us, and you look at kind of like it from a kind of wide angle, you're like, yeah, okay, the world's going to be brutal, it's going to be tough, there's going to be murders, but then what they show here is like an actual knife to the throat, the holding of it, and waiting until someone actually perishes before your eyes as they're bleeding out, and it shows how visceral and how awful this is. And this is just a routine bit of brutality that seems to happen all the time in this world. And I think it's great that they don't play this like an action scene of Joel just being a badass. It's like stab, stab, stab. It's like, no, it's showing that like he's taken some guy's life. And also, like, these are no name Mr. Beard people from David's group, but still, we've seen where they've come from. We've seen the people that they are. We've seen their struggle. And so you know that they are people with histories. They're not just faceless bad guys. They're actual people. And you can kind of understand their motivation because they're going out for revenge. They're going for justice. They're also taking that away, protecting themselves because, as far as they've been told, a crazy guy is on the loose murdering people. So they have to kind of do this for their own safety. I like these small little focusing in on small scenes like this to show the brutality of it, because I think it's absolutely necessary, because otherwise the action becomes gratuitous as opposed to actually really conveying what the world is like and how tough it actually is.
Yeah, this is a character-driven, character-focused, emotional story that involves some action. This isn't an
Hmm.
action movie.
Yeah.
So we're never going to get I mean, yeah, we get like super cool badass moments because the characters are badasses, but that is not the point of the stories. And making us sit with those moments of brutality, making us watch the life drain out of Mr. Beard's eyes, right? In front of Joel, it's we're supposed to be uncomfortable. We're supposed to be sitting with it and being like wanting it to be over already. And yeah, and it's like, gosh, our characters have never been in more trouble than they are here with Joel. They're trying to capture Joel, and Ellie wakes up in a freaking cage. Like, it's
Yeah.
not great, she has no weapons. She's probably concussed. It's not looking good.
Yeah, I will say this is my thing. I absolutely dislike with like video games, films, and TV. It's the whole blow to the head, knock them unconscious. It's brain trauma. Like
Yeah.
it's serious. Like it's a proper like you. If you get knocked like and concussed, it's like some serious shit. And it's way too prevalent of just an easy way of like cutting from one scene to another. I've never seen it in a film where someone's been knocked over the head to try and knock someone out, and it's just earnestly just hasn't worked because it just gone, ow, like it just
Yeah,
hurt.
that hurts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you hear me say the others want to kill you?
Yeah.
But I stopped them.
Fuck you.
Why don't we just start with your name?
Eat shit.
Hey, listen to me. You can't survive on your own. No one can. But I can help you. Let me protect you.
I'm not on my own.
Right, your friend. And how is he? I can see how much you care about him, so I know it hurts. But even so, you gotta face reality. That part of your life, it's ending. And what I'm offering you is a beginning. But if you can't find a way to trust me, then yes, you are alone.
But of course, Ellie wakes up like locked up. So it's a tough scenario, and David kind of like tries to almost like put the pitch of just you're dangerous, and kind of again does the kind of wielding of the power dynamic, and the power dynamic slightly shifted now away from him lauding Ellie with praise and kind of taking back some of it and asserting a bit of control over her. And I think that's almost him testing the waters a little bit. But Joel is there. Joel's powering back up, and Joel is on the hunt, which is, I think, great to see because we know that okay, she's not on her own completely. He is out there somewhere, and he is fighting to like get back to her.
Yeah, and he has to be and this is where Joel's intelligence wisdom really thrives. I think his street smarts, his experience, his survival
Hmm.
experience, because he is not doing well. Like the penicillin can only do so much, so he has to be very strategic in how he takes these guys down, how he takes them out. And we get some like really brutal torture scenes, the map trick coming back into play. Again, this is where he says, buddy, like your buddy told me,
Hmm.
so you better mark the same place on this map. He like stabs a guy to the kneecap, which is so disgusting and brutal and awful, and I hate it so much. But it
Yeah.
is so necessary that he knows exactly where to stab someone to make them give up information, right? Like,
Hmm.
I love. We think it's going to be the same map trick he plays on the couple, out in Wyoming in New
Hmm.
Jackson, but it's not because the guy's like, I swear, I'll tell you where it is. I swear, I won't lie, and he's like, that's okay, I believe him.
Yeah, and
So
it's
good.
It's so badass.
I
Like,
love it.
sometimes I don't want to laud too much praise on Joel for like the brutality of everything and the violence, but like you have to sometimes, as completely opposite of what I was just saying before, I'm going to be a complete hypocrite. Sometimes you do have to just appreciate a badass action guy being a badass action guy, right?
Because Joel is daddy and we all know it. All right. It's fine.
Exactly.
We're like, that's right. You get back to your daughter, you kill whoever stands in your way, and take these mother effers down. Get rid of them.
Mhm.
So especially when then we cut right back to David bringing Ellie food, seeing a human ear just hanging out on the floor. Like, that's normal. Clean up after yourselves, you
Clean up.
nasties.
Yeah, exactly. Like imagine if just anyone had wandered in and be like, "Why is there a human ear on the floor?" Go, "Oh,
Mhm.
what? Oh no, we ate people." It's
Mhm.
that's a I think again a little bit of a TV leap. That's a bit lazy in that sense. I think that probably
Yeah,
could
of
have been told a
course.
little bit better.
Yeah,
But I
they're
mean,
like,
with
"Here you go, in case you didn't realize it yet."
yeah, exactly. Like I think there could have been perhaps a bit more of an elegant way of doing it. But we
Mhm.
get David trying to win Ellie over in terms of what he wants, which is to bring her on board to be his little child wife slash leader with
What
him.
is she, a child bride? That's exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
He and he does this in the sickest way possible. So first he tries, to defend their decision to eat people. Like, we're starving, right? Like, sure, okay, you're starving. I need to keep these people safe. I need to keep them fed. Okay, that's what he's doing. Um, but then he calls Ellie a natural leader. She's smart, she's loyal, like he's paying her so many compliments. But then he says she has a violent heart. And how he knows this is because he sees himself in her. He sees that she possesses the same quality he does, which is when the world ended, he decided finally I'm allowed to be who I actually am. And he took that from the cordyceps themselves. Like, and it's so sick that that's the lesson he learned. It feeds to protect its children. It secures its future with violence if it must. Like, he thinks that he's so narcissistic that he thinks that by revealing this to Ellie, that she will recognize him as a kindred spirit and come along with him to lead, shepherd this group, because he sees the rest of his community as lesser than. He sees
Hmm.
them as sheep being led to literally led to the slaughter. And
Yeah.
he sees Ellie as someone who's a fighter, who, if he can turn her loyalties, he should be smarter than this, but he's not, because he's a narcissistic person. If he can turn her loyalties to his side, she will be a valuable second in command to him. But
Hmm.
again, he can't see past his own narcissism to see there's no way Ellie would ever, ever turn against Joel and go with him.
I think it's, as well as the narcissism, it's just the predatory nature. It's like being so close to getting what he is lusting for that, like, I think he's blinkered by it, which is just speaks to him not being a shepherd of people, but being a wolf and preying upon them. And
Mhm.
the language that he invokes is just so telling to what his agenda is, and the way in which he has tried to justify it to himself, but then also is just accepting of it because there are no consequences in this lawless world now.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
It's awful. It's really awful because you know what he's doing, he's trying to do. And the him getting like physically closer to her also. And then Ellie knowing and being able to read what he's doing. He's talking about them building a life together, right? Like, she knows this guy is sick. And
Mhm,
she is so smart, and she's always calculating, right? Like, how do I get out of this situation that I'm in? She has to be thinking. And so she takes an opportunity when she sees it. And when he puts his hands on hers, she breaks his freaking finger. And it is incredible because you can always rely on Ellie to not in some ways she's reckless
Mhm.
because he has the he has the power. She's in a cage literally. Like she can't do anything. But it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. She will always fight back and she breaks his finger. And I love the line of Ellie. And he's what? Tell them that Ellie is the little girl who broke your fucking finger. Like it's just incredible, right? She's bleeding from the face. He has smashed her face against the cage. And still,
Mhm.
that is what she is saying. It's incredible.
I I love it so much because throughout the entire game and show, like Ellie's been really snarky towards like anyone with authority. Like she's been giving it to Joel, she's been giving it to Maria, like when she met her. And it's always been this kind of like output of sass and snark that isn't always required. Here, you're fully in Ellie's camp and you're like, yeah, fucking tell him. He's an
Break his
absolute
finger. Break all of
yeah,
them.
exactly. And yeah, okay, maybe it would be smarter for her to play the long game, to take something from his kind of camp of like, okay, maybe I will just go along with things and then change it once I've like been afforded a little bit of freedom or something. I don't know, like maybe that is the way to play it. But Ellie is so disgusted by what she's hearing that she can't even entertain that idea. And
Well,
it just
and
goes
I
to show
think
that she's a good soul.
I also think it's possible she goes along with it for a little bit if Joel isn't involved. If Joel isn't
True.
in danger and sick and out there alone, if it's just Ellie and she gets captured and there is no Joel, I think there's a possibility she goes along with it for longer, knowing that she can then get out of the situation. But I think
Mhm.
she is so manic and panicked to get out of there and protect Joel that I don't think there's any chance she does anything but what she does here.
Yeah, it's almost like a very kind of like primal, feral kind of like instinct of just like,
Mhm.
no, I've got an opportunity to hurt this one. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take it because it
Yeah.
might be the only thing I ever get a chance to do.
Yeah.
Ellie, I know you're not infected. No one infected fights this hard to stay alive. So, how did you do it? What's the secret? Or are you just that fucking special? No one likes being humiliated, Ellie. You don't know how good I am! You don't know what I could have given you! If you had just let me! Well, I have news for you. Neither one of us is dying today.
We cut to Joel, who is making his way through the snow, struggling with obviously he is not in the best shape, and what seems to be a blizzard is coming in, which makes visibility incredibly difficult at this time. And he sees stains of blood on the snow and knows that obviously he has limited amounts of time to get to Ellie. And seeing him be lost in this place, not knowing where to go exactly, where to find her, and then seeing that there is a trail of blood to follow doesn't exactly fill him with the best confidence. But he finds not Ellie, he finds a lockup where he finds the killed deer, and not hung up to be bled out is a bunch of human bodies, which I think tells us
Yeah.
everything about the nature of what is going on here. In that, yes, okay, maybe they were doing this to survive. However, surely you would hang the deer first.
And the
And
horse, they have a whole dead horse, like, but no
mhm,
one is actively working on that. No one is
yeah,
skinning it, no one is cutting it up for meat, and that is a huge amount. A horse and a deer, like,
yeah,
it's sick, and there's a reason why they show it in that fashion, that they show the human bodies are the ones that are hung up, not the animals.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, I think it also just stresses the urgency in Joel needing to find Ellie. You know, as viewers, we're sitting here thinking, of course he's going to rescue her. This is Joel we're talking about. He's the protector. That's his role. That's what's going to happen because that's what's always happened. And of course you're rooting for him. Playing this part of the game is really hard. I remember, just because of you're Joel, you're at low health, you barely have anything, and you're forced to like wander around in the blizzard trying to
Hmm.
find Ellie. It's really, really hard. And I love how they stress the urgency of it in the show with these like smaller cues, you know?
It's really well done, and I think the game is a lot more involved than what the show is. This is a short scene in the show, whereas I think in the game it's like a good 20 minutes, maybe half hour of like gameplay of like traveling
Mhm.
through, dealing with some of the henchmen that are around in this place. And so yeah, it's a great way of kind of illustrating it and paying homage to it, but then also not necessarily getting the focus. I think the effective thing is obviously convey the thing about the hung bodies, um, get Joel to see the backpack so that he knows that Ellie is for sure here and that he is following the right trail of things. But yeah, we get to where David's patience is up and he goes, well, she's not going along with this plan. Well, we know what we have to do then, because she is effectively food at this point. So he and James storm in, unlock the cage, chuck her onto a butcher's block, and we get Ellie, I think, very astutely, very cleverly using her infection, her immunity to her advantage properly for the first time in the show, at least. And she tells them she's infected, and they hesitate, and it gives her the opportunity to do what she needs to do.
Mhm. And this again shows David's weakness. It'd be so easy for him to just shoot her in the head outside of the
Hmm.
cage, easily protected, away from
Yeah.
Ellie. But he wants power and control. And he says to her, like the sick fuck that he is, earlier, he says, like, don't you know, I like the violence, like I like the fight. That's what he wants.
Uh-huh.
He gets off on this. He wants to dominate her and exert physical control over her. He wants to see her afraid. And so that's why him and James come in and physically overpower her, put her on the butcher's block. They're going to kill her with a cleaver. Like, this is not a quick and painless death. They're going to
No.
make it hurt. And she takes that opportunity to bite him. And she wouldn't be able to she couldn't bite him if he just shot her from far away. This is his own fault. And they hesitate for 1 second too long. And oh my gosh, the death of James is incredible. Ellie just
Mhm.
cleaving him in the neck, him falling up and slouching up against the wall, and then he's dead. Like, Troy Baker must have been thrilled. Like, to have this be how he goes out is like
Yeah.
absolutely incredible, right?
Yeah, like, surely it's an actor's dream to have a really cool death scene of, like, especially, like, the
Yeah.
whole slump against the wall and slide down kinda thing.
Sign me
There's a
up.
I love the behind the scenes videos that were released of this episode purely for the fact that you get to at one point see Troy Baker with like the weird like cleaver that's got like the semicircle cut into it and
Yes.
it's like placed on his neck and stuff. He's just walking around like it's normal. It's just the practicality of these productions is actually just incredible. And again, I love that it's like full like prosthetics and like practical effects rather than all being like CG. Um, Great stuff. But yeah, the way in which Ellie, oh, again, like if David hadn't taken the flourish of like throwing the cleaver down right in the hand and like her being able to like do it in such a cool motion,
So smooth. Yeah.
oh, it's just so great.
It really is. And then we get um one of the most devastating, scary scenes in the entire game. I mean, also the
Yeah.
show, but like playing as Ellie, like running around a restaurant, trying to sneak up on David. You have to get the jump on him
Hmm.
all the while he is taunting Ellie is so awful, especially because in the game there are little bits of plate kind of broken up and scattered throughout the restaurant, and because you were trying to sneak up on him, you can't cross those boundaries because it will alert him to your presence and then he will kill you and then you start all over again. um
Yeah.
and so I felt like they did a really great job at depicting what is a really brutal, awful, difficult scene in the game, in the show. Uh David, again, he's narcissistic, so he has his blind spots, but he's smart enough to know you're not infected. You would have turned by
Mhm.
now. And also, why are you fighting so hard to stay alive if you are infected? That's not normal. Like, he knows these things, but again, he is so narcissistic that he thinks, well, it's over. I've locked the doors. You have no way out. And you do need a father, and I'm going to teach you, you know?
Oh, it's it's horrid because he also does it while giving a very kind of like grooming like statement of just like being like, "What's your secret? Why are you so special?" Like,
Mhm.
oh, just that building up of like appeasing her ego and like trying to charm her in a way. And then again, like it's being like, well, no one likes to be humiliated, Ellie. And then appealing to her and be like, well, you don't know how good I am. You don't know what I could have given you. It's just, oh, it's so scummy and nasty. And it's so well played because like the game, you are so fearful in that whole scene because he turns into a literal predator. Like you are being hunted in this restaurant at which you are trapped in and is burning around, and you have to be very careful in where you kind of go and you have to hide. And even in the game, it turns to a scene where you attack him, but he does get the advantage over you. He does pin you down and it's it becomes like this is such a tough scene to play in the game because you have to endure this. This isn't something like a cutscene that you can skip over. It's part of the like
Yeah.
the mechanics. Um,
And
and I
depending on
think that
how good you are at the game, you have to endure it multiple times because
mhm,
if you die, you're restarting. I got really lucky in my original playthrough that
mhm,
I was somehow I had David pinned kind of in this one section by some booths, and I was able to just circle around and you have to stab him a few times, kind of like a final boss sort of thing. And I was able to get the jump on him a bunch of times, and it didn't last too long for me. But I do know other people who like really struggled with this segment, and then they were forced to play it over and over and over again
yeah,
because they kept failing. And I mean, to a certain extent, it's like it's pretty punishing in that way, but it also makes you sit in Ellie's trauma for so long. And it's
mhm,
really, really hard because as viewers, if you haven't played the game and you're watching these scenes, of course, the thing that comes to your mind is, well, Joel's going to come in any second and save her, right? Like that has to be what happens. We all think because it has happened before, that's what's going to
yeah,
happen now, but that's not what happens. And I especially love Stuart the difference, the change they make from game to show here when it comes to Joel and his, role in this whole scene.
mhm. Yeah, the Ellie fights back. Like David is like pinning her down, is telling her overtly at this point is that he likes the fighting part of it, which is just get away. And telling her not to be afraid. And she reaches out for the cleaver, the machete, and just hacks away. And I think goes into a white rage. She doesn't I don't think that she's really I think she's on autopilot of just screaming and cathartically just getting away from the risk that there is. She's covered in blood and she spills out from this burning restaurant into the white expanse of the snow that's out there, and she is grabbed by Joel. And instinctually, she fights against him. And it takes Joel a bit of effort to get through and to reassure her that he's there, that it is Joel and that she is safe. And this scene broke my heart on the show because in the game, Joel arrives in the restaurant as it's burning. He pulls her away from hacking at this now body of David. Um, and you don't get the conversation. It's all done as the soundtrack kind of like fades in, dialogue goes to like to nothing, and you just
Mhm.
see that they are having a conversation. Um, but in the TV show, we get what is said. We get that Joel is just reassuring her that it's him, to look at him, and he calls her baby girl. It's okay, baby girl, I've got you.
It's me. Look, it's me. It's me. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay, baby girl. I got you. I got you.
How can something be so sweet but so horrible at the same time?
Yeah, because we know it's what he called Sarah. He probably hasn't said baby girl in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And him, I know that they talk a lot, the creators talk a lot about how agency was very important to them and making sure Ellie had agency. She saved herself. She
Yes.
physically saves herself, and Joel comes in after and tries to reorient her emotionally and just give her a soft space to land. And I love that choice. I think obviously there's the practicalities. How is Joel getting in a locked burning building? Like how is all of that working? I don't really
Mhm.
care about any of that. They could have made that work if they really wanted to, right? Break a window, he jumps in. Who knows? Who cares? I think it's more important that Ellie saves herself here, and that, yes, we can still have Joel coming in after the fact and comforting her, but the fact that Ellie is forced to save herself, and that we know this isn't the end of that, this will stay with her. This forever changes Ellie. But to still have that very sweet moment at the end where once she realizes it's Joel, she doesn't say anything. She just hugs him. They need each other in those moments, it's everything. I love the changes they made. Isn't this also the episode Bella Ramsey is I don't know, wins the Emmy for, right? Is this episode probably
Think, yeah.
this very scene. Um it's so well done. I especially like the realism of it, right? Like Ellie walking out, her hair just being a complete mess, blood on her face, doesn't even know where she is, where she's going, isn't even really like running as much as she is just like in a daze of what just
Mhm.
happened.
Yeah.
It's so well done, and it is so difficult to watch. Um because in that moment too, if you're putting yourself in Joel's shoes, the guilt he must feel
Yeah.
for like everything Ellie just went through, and the fact that again he wasn't there for her.
Mhm.
Again,
Yeah.
he can't blame him. He can blame himself. He shouldn't, but he's going to because
He
he's Joel.
will. Yeah. Exactly. It's I think this is just at times this part of the game and this episode is commonly critiqued by people, even those who like it, because it is, I think, on some reads, brutal for being brutal's sake. Like it is showing the full furthest horrors that you can probably imagine in this world, and it exposes you to them, and it makes you observe it not through Joel's lens that you've been playing as and who we've primarily been following, in terms of like the narrative of the TV show. It's shown through Ellie's eyes, and to have that vulnerability of like a child that's going through this world, it just twists a knife even further. And I think for some people, it's too much. Um, for me, I think that yes, it is too much, but I don't necessarily think that that's a negative. I think that it's a necessary thing to really honor how horrible this is, and to honor how why people make the choices that they make in this, and why it is so important that connections like Joel and Ellie's are made. Because if you let those horrors run wild and you don't establish strong connections that can overcome immense amounts of grief and trauma, then what is the point of it all? Like, it illustrates why their connection is so special and why everything that they've done is so miraculous. Um, Bella Ramsey, the look that she gives Joel is just unparalleled. Like, I don't know how someone can convey the look of someone that is so truly vulnerable, lost, scared, needing assistance, but then also relieved, and how you can make that just very subtle shift between those two
Mhm.
in the blink of an eye, while also having Pedro Pascal just grab your face and be like, "Look at me."
How do you not just kiss, right? Like, how do you not just see that face of mine and just lean in? Uh, yeah,
It's just masterful. It's so, so good.
it is. I would agree, like, that I understand why people, don't really like the and, like, it's difficult to watch, and it should be, but
Mhm.
I never feel like it is unnecessarily gratuitous. I think they show you exactly enough of how much you need to see, right? When we're watching Ellie cleave into David, we're not seeing David's disgusting mangled body, right? We are
Nope.
seeing the trauma on her face. And I think it's important to establish that because and we'll probably talk more about this in the spoiler section, but when David says you're violent, he's not lying. Like, it's true.
Confirming everything.
She
Yeah.
is. Yeah, she is violent. She's activated by violence. We've seen it many times at this point in the series. And I do think, like, her cleaving into David, right? Like, no one's blaming her. Not a single person is being like, maybe cleave him a little less. Absolutely not. But, like, she keeps going and going and going and going, right? Like, there is this pressure release valve almost about it.
Mhm.
And it never felt unnecessarily gratuitous to me. It is hammering home a very, very important theme and points to make about Ellie as a character and also the world that we are in. We've been warned since episode 1 that it's not the infected you always need to worry about, it's other people too. And there are people in this world that will take opportunities where they see them. They will say, the world is now broken and I am now going to be in charge of these broken people and I will manipulate them. There will always be people in the world like that who will take advantage. And I think it's important to show that. And, like, no, this isn't like, I'm not laughing a mile a minute watching this episode, but it doesn't mean that it's not impactful and important to have it and to do exactly what they did. I wouldn't change a single thing about what they did. I think every decision they made was spot on. And I do think, again, when we're talking adaptations, the meaningful changes they make to these scenes, I think, are just leaps and bounds. And there was nothing wrong with the way the game did it. But then when you see how they changed it slightly to elevate it and to give the
Mhm.
character of Ellie more agency, it just feels so important. And I don't know how you can watch this episode and be like, "That was unnecessary." It's like, "Mm-mm, no, I've seen Game of Thrones. I've seen unnecessary, gratuitous violence. This is not that."
Mhm. Exactly. And this is the thing, it's one thing to rely on it for world building and for, like, that aspect, but it's another to also, like, throw in thematic, like, relevance and to make it necessary to the plot
Mhm.
completely. I that point about that you made about, confirming what David had said about her being violent and how that's gonna shape her trauma, because it's one thing to think of it as just a surface level trauma of like, oh, I've just hacked apart this like pedophile. No, no, no. I'm like, yes, there is that, like the physical trauma of like kind of what's happened, but there was also, is he right? Am I like him? Like, did he recognize that because I'm like him? Like, there's so many different thoughts that are gonna fester with Ellie for the longest time, and it's gonna take so much work to overcome. And that, I think, is what you see in that scene where Joel is trying to comfort Ellie, is just that Ellie is dealing not only with the immediacy of just what's happened, but there's also, I think, already like everything is just swirling in there. And I think that's what adds so much nuance to the performance, which
Mhm.
makes the whole thing for me worth it. Because how can you not appreciate that, like that performance alone?
Mhm.
Oh, quite the episode, right?
Why is it that I feel like every single time we're getting near the end of the podcast, we're just like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
It's so much, but it's
it
so
really
good.
is.
That's the thing. I wouldn't put myself through the torture of some of these episodes, certainly not multiple times, if I
Hmm.
didn't love it so much. Like it's just so brilliantly done. And then of course, like, oh my god, Joel giving Ellie his coat as they walk away. I don't know why that it's just like, oh my god, such a dad. Like, yes, she's cold. Keep her warm,
Hmm.
Joel. I love it so much. I can't.
And again, like I've got to give props to like just some classy choices of just okay, because what you could do is like over embellish this ending. You could have them walking away and then cut to like a scene of them like unpacking, or I don't know, like a slow pan back to everything on fire behind them. Like it's totally unnecessary. It's like we've
Mhm.
got everything we needed out of it, which is focusing on Joel and Ellie, and we fade to black from there.
Yeah.
Again, I have to commend some really classy choices with this show, which might be more production based. I don't know. Maybe it's a production necessity to not, have a shot of a huge burning steakhouse.
I mean, they have
Um,
HBO
but they got
money.
HBO money, right?
Got
Yeah,
HBO money. Come on.
exactly.
They're just
I mean,
classy.
yeah, you got like you got Pedro Pascal running through like an already snowy Canada with big wind machines and snow machines. If you're not paying through the teeth for the insurance alone on that,
Exactly.
you can front for a bit of like fire and stuff. So like I like to think that it is just a choice that they make of just like, no, they're the focus. This is what we go on. And the
Mhm.
spectacle of it all isn't necessary. But it's not to say that this episode didn't have spectacle. Like the shots inside the steakhouse as it was on fire, all practical effects, like embellished with some CG here and there. But of course, they did actually set a building on for a set
Yeah.
on fire, which is I love choices that favor practical effects over CG. I always
Same.
will because they just look more, they look better, they look more
It doesn't make everything
realistic.
look the same, right? Like CGI sometimes everything looks a little samey when you use it so
Hmm.
much. And like, as someone who is infatuated with the original Jurassic Park, like I will always favor practical effects. I think there's something so fun about
Hmm.
practical effects if you can use them correctly, right? In a way that doesn't look weird. I think everything looks there's not a single moment where you're just like, "Oh, well, they could have done this better." It doesn't feel that way at all. Everything feels
No,
very real.
yeah. In terms of departures from the game, I think the only thing that I would love to see is Ellie handle a bow because I love that gaming mechanic difference. Of
Yeah.
course, like Joel favors the revolver and more physical brutality because he's a stronger build. Ellie, on the other hand, favors a more dexterous approach. She's very
I mean, I love
nimble.
a
She's got a
ranger.
switchblade.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love a ranged attack. I agree. I think having Ellie learn to shoot a gun from Joel with the rifle, I could see why they went that
yeah,
route. And again, I think we get the added bonus of watching Bella Ramsey struggle holding the rifle, which just
precisely.
reinforces the idea of like, oh, look how young Ellie is, like look how inexperienced she is. I think we get some benefits of her not using a bow, but I mean, I agree. I'm a sucker for a bow. So,
Hmm. And
um,
also, I think as well, like the rifle puts in some limits as well because obviously she fires it. She's got to reload, and reloading a rifle isn't a quick process at all, especially for an
exactly.
inexperienced person with a gun. As Ellie is at that point. So when she is in the standoff when James returns back and stuff, he's got a pistol. He can pop off a couple of shots. Like she's got one shot, and if she
Yeah.
misses, she's totally effed. So it's funny to see that even in that dynamic where they still have a bit of an upper hand, David still makes the choices that he does. I think they use choices like that of just really grounding it in realism and having some logic to everything that's going on. Speaks to the quality of the show massively. I don't think that would be afforded in other shows. Not talking to anyone, Walking Dead.
I love it.
Okay. Anything else you want to cover on the episode on it as a whole? Or we could jump into
I'm ready to
spoilers.
jump spoilers. Yeah, let's do it.
Of course, then, if you are listening, you only watched up to this episode, you're free to go. You're free to go and watch the finale of season 1. Very much looking forward to that. But of course, if you haven't subscribed, please do. Look for the Light Podcast. Look for us on any podcatcher of choice. We should be on all of them. If not, email in. Let me know. Look for lightpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on all the socials. Look for Light Pod. But I think it's time for us to jump into some spoilers. Oh boy. Spoilers. Here we go once more. This is a phenomenal episode for teeing up what comes next, which is the finale and, of course, the decision that Joel takes on behalf of Ellie. The theme of
Mhm.
agency is massively what is on display here, right, Jess?
Yeah, gosh, also, just in this day and age, like the importance of body autonomy and having agency, um, I love it. I think it works so well with what's coming up of of them allowing Ellie to have agency in terms of killing David and escaping by herself. I love this character of Ellie, her making her own choices is so important. Literally from the minute that she is born, she is not making any choices. She is put in Fedra school by Marlene. She is forced to endure all of that because and then also just being the holder of immunity, right? Like there's just like so much that is outside of your control. And so any little moment where Ellie is able to make decisions for herself and put her life in her own hands, I love to see. So I, in particular, really love the choice to allow Ellie to be the one to save herself rather than have Joel come in and save her because it's so important and integral to the character and the story that they're telling. Yeah, I love it. I really, really, really love it.
Yeah. I think as well, like, the game doesn't kind of there still is that sense of agency in the game, but of course, like with Ellie being amongst the burning building, it's almost like Joel rescues her from herself because I think that she's so consumed in her own violence that she doesn't even think about the practicality of getting out of a burning building.
Yeah.
That she is excessively kind of hacking away at this guy, and probably would. I think in the game, I think what they're trying to get to is that she would still be hacking away if it weren't for him stepping in and being like, "No, you need to stop this. I need to save you from yourself in this moment." But again, similar vibes in terms of like she helps herself out in terms of dealing with the threat, but Joel is there to help with the aftercare of it all almost. It's just in a different kind of aspect. The violence that Ellie exhibits is so brutal, and of course is setting up some massive things for game 2, which we are almost certainly getting in season 2 now that they've released the new trailer, which
Mm.
can I just say, I mean, we will get into it big time in these couple of episodes in between seasons 1 and 2, but holy shit, does the season 2 trailer look so good. We've got confirmations we are getting the Nora interrogation, which is everything when it comes to Ellie's violence and what she will do in the pursuit of revenge. And of course, the theme of revenge, like the fact that like Hannah is like, you should kill them both. And that really, like, the hunting of Ellie is what brings this
Yeah.
community's downfall. Like, I mean, really, it's also the fact that they're led by a maniacal pedophile. But like, there's also that
Mhm.
thing of like, well, if they had just let Ellie be, none of this would have happened. And so the setting up of how revenge will ultimately destroy you is there and is gonna be there for a while.
Yep. Violence begets violence begets violence, right? Like it's
Mhm.
this I said earlier in the non-spoiler version, like this is a turning point for Ellie. I think we can see certain moments in the show, in the story, where it's like this is a marker. There's no turning
Mhm.
back, right? This is a very clear marker. In fact, I remember, and you know me, I have a terrible memory, but I will always remember the very next scene that we get in the game. It's Joel trying to be, like, very light and fun and, like, have a nice little chat, and Ellie is somewhere else. Like, she is
Mhm.
so distracted and off in her own head, and it hit me so hard that because of David, Ellie has lost a little bit of joy in her
Yeah.
general demeanor. She has had to grow up because of what she goes through in this episode, and it changes her, and I don't think we get everything that happens in game 2 with Abby and all the revenge, right? Like, I don't think Ellie is as hardened if not for this experience. Sure, she's still, like, a violent person, and she's still, like, again, energized a little bit by violence, but, like, seeing that come out in her in this episode, oh, it just so sets things up perfectly for what we're gonna see in season 2, and
Mhm.
that trailer, oh my god, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. We got confirmation of, like, so many things, which again, we'll get into, but, like, the museum, if we don't get a dinosaur, we're gonna get a
Oh, the
we're gonna get a
museum's
dinosaur.
happening, people.
I can't, the dinosaur. But yeah, this episode
Spores
sets
as
a lot
well.
up. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so much that is set up, and I think not to get too much into season 2 already. I think even the next episode, like we still have one more episode left of this season. But the beginning way in which they handle it next episode, and we will get into that into more detail. But I just want to say, like, the way in which it flows through from this episode into the next is so faithful to the games in terms of establishing that tone and also stretching out that process with Ellie, and it sets up what we get with the giraffes and everything. And it just everything. It's difficult because earlier I said that, like, obviously this episode is necessary for the whole wider story, and it's not gratuitous, and it's like it's necessary because of stuff. That payoff comes next episode massively with the conversations that it prompts and the way in which kind of like it forces Joel to change. And it is the straw that breaks the camel's back with Joel in terms of a lot of things. And to have that set up go across so many different episodes of this season of failure and getting to that,
Mhm.
it's it's some really good writing. I love
I know,
it.
have we mentioned how brilliant the show is?
Yeah. Do we like it? I think we like it.
It's pretty good, I guess.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm really excited. Yeah, but we'll be covering the last episode of season 1 next week. And of course, like we said, we'll have a couple of episodes in between where we will be getting into the trailers for what's coming up. We'll be doing a deep dive into the second game in its entirety. We'll be talking everything about Abby, about WLF, the Seraphites. Really looking forward to that. But I think this concludes everything for season 1, episode 8. So before we fully wrap up, should we channel a bit of Will Livingston, Jess?
Yes, please bring some levity.
Well, why didn't the venison taste right?
Oh, no! Why?
Because it was actually a dear old friend.
No!
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye. Bye.